That's all good. Just to play, I'm going to ring this and it'll be really loud.
Round one. So I've learned to warn our guest speakers about the ring of the bell tone. Welcome to the September 8th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm President Matt Busick, and I'm glad to see all of you here today. We have several guests that I'd like to welcome. If each of you could please stand as I say your name, that would be great so all of us can see you. Marty Anderson, part of the Iowa House of Representatives, and guest of Becky Greenwald. Welcome, Marty. Zach Mahoney is here as a guest of Susan Judkins-Jostin, Z-Mark Financial. Welcome. Joyce Wheeler, spouse of Todd Wheeler. Joyce couldn't make it. Oh, okay. Well, everybody say hi to Joyce. Did Susan make it, Hal? Yeah. Okay. Susan Koch Bridgeford, guest of Hal Chase, and the next four guests are guests of Doug Dorner and affiliated with our guest speaker and the symphony. So Alan Magruder is a board member and retired Simpson College professor. Lynn Flater is a Symphony Board Treasurer, Assistant Vice President of Tax at Fidelity and Guarantee Life. I told you I wouldn't mess that up, and I did. Andrea Solomon is Des Moines Symphony Director of Development, and Rebecca Young, Symphony Board Secretary, Head of Internal Controls at American Equity Investment Life Insurance Company. Welcome, everyone. So as we anticipate today's presentation, please consider the following quotes from someone I found on the internet. His name is Shana Dilawayo. So that's the best I could do. I'm sure it's wrong. Zimbabwean-born, Canadian-based philosopher, entrepreneur, and author. So here we go. Symphonies begin with one note, fires with one flame, gardens with one flower, and masterpieces with one stroke. Love is the soul's music, and its songs are symphonies. And last but not least, the world is an orchestra, the universe is a symphony. If you could all please stand, I'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right, and if you could please greet those around you.
How are you? My pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, really?
Hi, Bill.
That
was exhausting. Whatever I go to, after about an hour, my face starts hurting from laughing so much.
Just introduce yourself.
Say to my wife, I'm going to massage you.
I don't have a bill to bring or a gong. But it's, first of all, thank you, President Matt. You can see I took seriously his admonition last week to bring guests to Rotary.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Maestro Joseph Junta. Joe grew up in what he and all who live there call South Jersey. That geographic good luck put him in close proximity to both Philadelphia and New York City, and his wonderful parents took advantage of that and at an early age introduced Joe to the Philadelphia Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic, and all of the other cultural advantages of cities such as that. After high school, he went on to join us in the Midwest, attending and graduating from Northwestern University with an undergraduate degree in music. Northwestern, Matt, by the way, is from Northwestern. Raise hands for people connected with Northwestern. Well, that's good enough.
1, 2, that's it.
There we go. So an undergraduate degree in music, a master's degree in conducting from Northwestern University. Went from there to Waterloo, Cedar Falls, where he was the director and conductor of that symphony for 14 years before he was named director of the Des Moines Symphony 34 years ago. The symphony has grown under his tutelage to be recognized as one of the finest regional orchestras in the United States, and I can say that with great pride. One of the side benefits of preparing an introduction for someone you know is that sometimes you dig in and learn things you didn't know about him. I know a fair amount about Joe. I was very aware of his work in Des Moines, but much less aware that he has guest conducted great orchestras both in this country and around the world. That list includes the Chicago Symphony, the London Philharmonic, and orchestras in Mexico, Europe, South America, Canada, and Japan. I would love to take time and mention that the symphony's remarkable activities with Yankee Doodle Pops and the new Waterworks Pops concerts, which we just completed this past weekend, but I want to let Joe speak to that. I mentioned that he's been here for 34 years, and he has been a resident of Des Moines for 34 years. I cannot emphasize enough the uniqueness of that. It is exceedingly rare for a conductor to live full-time in the city in which they conduct. This has been great for the symphony, and it's been great for the community of Des Moines. Maestro Junta has 2 grown children, and he and his wife Carrie live in West Des Moines and have what I refer to as 2 spirited dogs, Rocky and Shy. Now, think about those names. Rocky and Shy are nicknames for Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky. Go figure. Maestro Junta.
How lucky am I to have a board president, Doug Dorner. What a terrific guy this is, and I told him in private, I'll tell publicly now, that if I ever got sick and needed a doctor's care, I want Doug to come out of retirement to be my doctor, because how special that would be, and how warm of a person he is. His leadership and his skills go a long time in this community. He's helped make a lot of people feel better, and that's not only just physically, but also emotionally. And I'm grateful to call him a friend, and thrilled that he's president of our symphony board. I knew his dad, and I'll tell you just a short story about his father, because he used to meet over in this corner over here. Whenever I come to the Des Moines Club, I always think of, it's a little nostalgic for me, because there was a table always set up over here, the other side of the room, sort of the power table. And names like Hurd and Crichton and Blank and Dorner, and they would meet over here, and virtually every major project that happened in Des Moines started right here at that table. That was sort of a think tank. And there are a lot more names that I'm forgetting. Humble Senior, Knapp, the list goes on and on. But without those people over there, Des Moines would be a lot different place than it is today. When I think of the Skywalk system, and the this building, and the Principal Tower, and so many other things, wells, and all that's happening along the river. Without those 20 or 25 names in Des Moines, this would have been a pretty sleepy river town. And those people helped make a difference, and I'm so grateful that not only did I have the privilege of meeting most of those people, but I also had the privilege of getting into their pockets. And that was the biggest lesson that I learned from David Grinier, who, for those of you that maybe are younger, he owned the Register and the Tribune, also owned the Minneapolis newspaper. His family owned a lot of TV stations and so on. And he was a real curmudgeon, but boy, oh boy, was he generous to this community. And I first met him in Minneapolis when I was guest conducting up there. And the president of the board, his name was Dick Cizik, and that board included names like Kenny Dayton and John Pillsbury and the president of Honeywell and so on, big corporations. And they felt, as business people, they felt that since the weather was so awful in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that they couldn't keep enough of your young people graduating from the University of Minnesota, so they left for Atlanta or Miami or Texas, Houston or Dallas. So those 20 or so, in those days it was all men, sorry ladies, but that's the way it was back then. It wasn't right, but that's the way it was. Those 20 or so men got together and said, we need to do something about this community. If not, we're just gonna fall apart and not grow. And they created what was then called the 5% Club. Now, Cortesio, do you remember that? Do you remember this this story that I'm telling? The 5% Club. So each one, 20 companies got together and decided that they would give 5% of their pre-tax profits to a fund, sort of like a United Arts Fund. And over the years, that grew, and it was a huge amount of money in those days. Now it's a 2% club. But the Ordway, Orchestra Hall in Minneapolis, the Children's Museum, the improvements on the campus, Northrop Auditorium, the improvements on the campus of the University of Minnesota, all started like that. Well, Des Moines didn't have that sort of vision to do that, or the wherewithal to do it, so they had to do it privately. And so when you think of building the Civic Center, that probably wouldn't have been built hadn't been for this group of guys over here that were nervous once Stevens Auditorium got built in Ames, that Des Moines residents that were interested in culture would go up there to hear the major orchestras and all the talent up there. And David kept saying, well, that road runs both ways. We want to bring people down here. And the Civic Center was built for $9 million in 1979. And I first conducted in it long before I became the music director of the Des Moines Symphony, because I came down here as a guest conductor with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra in 1982 or 3. I was about 3 years old. And then later conducted a lot of ballet with the old Des Moines Ballet Club. Well, familiarity, it was something that I look around these tables and I see all these faces and I wonder, wow, you've not changed. Cortesio, past president of my board, Jim Vickery, past president of my board, Bill Jackson, board member, John Tone, longtime friend, lots of people around here. I know I'm missing some people, but Mr. Oman, back there we met a long time ago, but familiarity is could be good or bad in my profession. And in a town like Des Moines, this is very unique. I was in the grocery store maybe in the mid-90s, and you know how sometimes you find that someone knows you or they're sort of stalking you or wondering who you are, and this attractive woman, so I would go down one aisle and she was sort of in the back, and then I would go down another. And I wasn't sure what was going on, but I finally fooled her, and we came down the same aisle, and we're coming this way. And we stopped, and I looked right at her, and she said, "Are you Maestro Junta?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I shook out my hand, put my hand out and shook her hand. I said, "What's your name?" And she told me. And she said, "You know, I wasn't sure about you. My husband and I come to your concerts, and you look so tall on stage. But in person, you're so short." Another time, we were doing all sorts of crazy things in these early days to try to get the Des Moines Symphony out of the Civic Center. You know, all the arrogance that our orchestras throughout this country put up with. It makes perfect sense. All the orchestras, Boston, New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Los Angeles, they were all created because immigrants came from Europe. And they created models exactly like they remember their parents going to. So they were all traditional and conservative, and great orchestras, by the way. And those orchestras were made up of musicians that were Hungarians and Russians and Italians and English, and they had great spirit about their playing. And that's what made them great. As a matter of fact, George Zell, the great conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra, was hired specifically to create an orchestra in Cleveland that would sound European. And to this day, it's the most European sounding orchestra in the country. Well, so I was getting back to all the kind of crazy publicity. I devised a program called Nightmare on Walnut Street. And this is a Halloween program. And I decided that the orchestra would all dress up in Halloween costumes. And it sold quite well. I hired an organist and put them in the pit, dressed them up, and then he played the Bach toccata and fugue, and the pit came up, and there was smoke coming up. And well, as part of the publicity for this, our marketing director, whose name escapes me, dressed me in a Dracula outfit, complete with the fangs, and I had a picture taken. Well, in 1992, a publication started called City View, and Connie Weimer started that. And so Connie called and said, "I understand you're doing a concert, yada, yada, yada." The bottom line is that my picture shot was on City View, the cover of City View, in this Dracula outfit. So the same week that newspaper came out, I'm sitting in Cafe Sue. Is that restaurant still here in Downey Junction? I'm not sure it is. It's a fantastic restaurant. And I'm doing whatever you do, eating and reading, and I remember this was about 1993 maybe. And I look out of the corner of my eye and a very tall, attractive, rugged looking gentleman comes my way. And he had the newspaper, City View. And he looked at me and he said, "You're famous." And he showed me the picture. And I looked up and I said, "Not as famous as you, Mr. Eastwood." Clint Eastwood, and he was here scouting for Bridges of Madison County, which he eventually filmed here. So he said, "You know, I love classical music, and in my next life, I want to be you." And I said, "In my next life, I want to be me with your bank account." All right, so now I'll get to the more formal part of what I'd like to say. First of all, the Des Moines Symphony is all about making music, and I think we do it as well as any regional orchestra in the country, and I'm very proud of that. People ask me all the time, what is it about music that popular music or music that is commercial or written for large masses of people, what is it about it that makes it memorable for us? Well, if you were in a beginning music theory class, I would put my scientific hat on and say, well, music is made up of 4 elements. Melody, we all know what a melody is. Harmony. Harmony is when you take a melody and then add chords to it. Anything you do in in vertical motion is harmony. Chord symbols, jazz, you'll relate to that. Rhythm, does it have a beat? What's the tempo? What's the time? And then finally, timbre, which is a little bit more difficult to explain, but timbre is basically the quality of an instrument. In other words, what makes the flute sound different than the clarinet, than the violin, and so on. So, melody, harmony, rhythm, and timbre. Basically, that's a scientific definition of music. Well, what I tell people that ask me about this is that music, we can't touch music, but it can touch us in ways that surprise us. It can change us. It can change the way we think about the world. It can change the way we view other people. It can change the way we look at other cultures. Most importantly, music brings us together. We can learn so much from sitting next to someone who is a different faith, different color, different background. I discovered this early on in my life because my parents, as Doug intimated, my parents were two wonderful Italian parents, and we lived in a neighborhood where everybody was different. We had different colors, different religions, and my friends, I had as many black friends and Asian friends and Irish friends than I had white friends. It was a fantastic way and time to grow up. But we never thought about our differences. We only thought about our mothers who cooked differently. So I had some fantastic food, and it became a passion for me, eating great food from other cultures. And that's maybe more than anything the reason that I went into music, because I knew that it brings people together. And that was always very exciting to me. Now, specifically, the Des Moines Symphony, I'll tell you a little bit about us. The orchestra has an 85-year history. It's one of the few orchestras in the country that have had consecutive years of music making. The Des Moines Symphony has always had a series. Now, during World War II, there were only 2 concerts, but they still call it a series, so that's pretty remarkable. The Boston Symphony can't say that, the Chicago Symphony can't say that, but we can. Consecutive 85 years of music making, that speaks very highly of Des Moines and this region. The other thing is that we have the most remarkable and dedicated musicians that I have ever conducted anywhere. In my profession, orchestras will often dare you to conduct them. They're actually taught sometimes that conductors sort of don't know what they're doing, or inconsistent, and it's a shame. But I learned that early on and realized that how am I gonna change, if I ever was lucky enough to find a professional orchestra, how am I gonna change this approach from conductors telling people what to do versus empowering people around you to do their very best by role modeling. And to me, now that I look back on it, I refer to that, I think, as leadership that comes from within, empowering people, give them an environment to be expressive, give them an environment where they can come in and be willing to prepare and be encouraged to do their very best. Not tell anyone what to do. That's not leadership. And what I found here is a tremendously open spirit with our musicians. And it was not easy in my early days, because the orchestra had there were a few personalities that were sort of entitled, felt entitled. I think I see John Cortizio smiling, and he knows exactly what I mean. But boy, it wasn't too long before we were able to get that turned around. And within maybe 6, 7 seasons, I was able to take almost 90 heartbeats that would come into the first rehearsal, all beating at different times. And after 3 or 4 rehearsals, those heartbeats were beating as one. What a privilege that was. And looking back on it, I'm not sure how that happened, but I can tell you that it happened for the right reason. And the right reason is that we all wanted to give this very special community something that was far better than anyone ever thought would be created here. And that's what we did. And I'm very, very proud of that. The orchestra these days has taken a long step from the last 3 decades, and we are now, as Doug spoke about, one of the leading regional orchestras in the country. The best thing that ever happened to me, besides being married and a wonderful opera singer and having 2 children and now 3 grandchildren, was the fact that we were able to somehow, during that rocky start, John, I was able to stay. And the minute that I would begin to get frustrated about something, or think, I'm not sure I'm gonna the right skill set to do this, John or Vickery, one of these guys would say, look, you could do this. We're going to make this happen. And I had great counsel, great advice from people, and we were able to move through the challenges that we had. Financially, we do a happy dance when we pay Mahler and Beethoven and lose $50,000. That's a good day for us. And that's why we have to have the annual fund and all this. But that's the kind of stuff a nonprofit goes through all the time. And what I was always, again, wonderfully happy about with this community is that not only the symphony overachieved and continues to do so, but the Art Center and the opera and the ballet and the Playhouse. I mean, these are fantastic institutions, all led by very talented and capable people, and we all get along. That's incredibly unique. I can tell you this much, that when I was in Minneapolis, nobody got along. No one got along, and that made it very, very tough for us. It's been a difficult time for orchestras in this country, orchestras around the world, and whoever thought that COVID would bring our industry to its knees? There's never did I think in my lifetime that we would stop the performing arts. And you most likely could not find a business that's worse to be in than in the symphony business these days. I tell all my friends that it's a wonderful profession, but it's a very tough business to be in. And the reason I say that is because we're a business that thrives on putting a lot of people into small spaces. And the only worst business you can be in through COVID was Broadway. If you've been in New York and sit in these seats, they pack 1,200 people the size of that movie screen there, and it's very difficult. So we were able to get through that through a tremendous amount of ingenuity and spirit and creative thinking. So we're one of the few orchestras in the country that were able to do a complete season during COVID that was all virtual. Your Des Moines Symphony was broadcast throughout the world. And we have documentation that we had listeners in Australia, London, Germany, France, Italy, even Russia. And that was really quite remarkable for us. So to be able to do that, take a regional orchestra for the Midwest and be able to broadcast what we do to the world was really quite remarkable. And I'll tell you another thing about the Des Moines Symphony, is that it aligns specifically and directly with my personality. If the board of directors had said to me 25 years ago, Joe, we want you to play a standard overture, concerto, intermission, and symphony at each concert, I'd go and be a shoe salesman or something, because that's just not in my personality. I watched the orchestras of Philadelphia. It was the most conservative orchestra do that, and they did it well. They did it better than anyone, but I just didn't want to do that. I watched a mentor of mine, who maybe some of you would know, Leonard Bernstein, who was crazy, and he had more ideas in a lifetime that dozens of us could have. But he kept everybody spirited and everybody guessing what was going to happen at concerts. And I took a piece of that when I studied with him at Tanglewood back to Des Moines. And I say to everyone, when you come to a concert of the Des Moines Symphony, I want you to expect the unexpected. You will absolutely hear something that's familiar to you. You can count on hearing something that you may never want to hear again. And you can count on being surprised that sometimes you might hear something new that you actually appreciate and enjoy. But there's one more thing that I can tell you about coming to a concert. You're going to feel better hearing the Des Moines Symphony after the concert than you were coming into the room. And I don't know why. I can't tell you why that happens, but I can tell you that it does. And I can tell you that with all the research and scientists that have talked to musicians and done tests on musicians, we don't know why that happens, but we know that it's going to make you feel better. Inspiration comes from daily life. Composers are inspired by nature, religion, war, tragedy, love, geography. It's all there. It's all daily life. And those composers that write pieces want everyone to be exposed to this music. And that's why I'm so passionate about every single student in this community having the opportunity to study a violin or a clarinet or a string bass or a percussion instrument or sing in a choir. That's how important I think it is, that because I think if you don't at least study a musical instrument, there's no way you can really appreciate what goes into it. And that, to me, you're not a complete citizen unless you have music and art in your background. I don't think it's anything like many of us I don't think it's anything that you put up on a pedestal. I just think it's something that you need in your life. And our lives are better with music in them. Now, a word that I've left out in the last 15 or so minutes is classical. I don't draw a line between classical music and popular music. I've never been able to, because I like too much music. I'm not saying that listening to Frank Sinatra sing My Way is as good as the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven. What I am saying is that both can change you. And what I am saying is that if they're done well, both will be memorable. And that's what music is all about. When my little granddaughter, at 3 years old, sang Frere Jacques to me, that was a good day for me. And that was great music to me. Now, our musicians come from all walks of life. This is not an orchestra that pays enough to provide a living to them, but some of them play in several different orchestras. Some of them are college professors, school music teachers. Some of them have private studios in their own home. And as the orchestra has grown, our auditions and our name has grown. So I'll give you one example. We have national auditions now. A week ago, last Monday, I heard 35 flute players from all over the country, 11 different states, came to Des Moines at their own expense and played behind the screen, because all our hiring is done anonymously, played behind the screen for a committee, and we hired our next principal flutist. 35 musicians vied for that job. About a year ago, we had a trombone spot open, and 52 musicians from all over the country came to play for us. So as people have retired that maybe have lived locally here, we've been able to replace them with people of prominence from the Juilliard School or the Frost School or something, Northwestern, USC, some of these great music schools, and that in turn brings life and energy to some of our more veteran players and keeps the orchestra youthful and vibrant and whatnot. You know, I've never worked a day in my life. When you find something you love to do, it's not work at all. And I have been, this has been a tremendous privilege for me to lead this orchestra, and I hope I've got a few years left in me before I sail off. But one of the last things, this is the last thing I'll say, one of the things that I wanted to say to you is that every single orchestra in this country is questioning its purpose. We know that we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us. I just read a report this morning that the Boston Symphony has only had a renewal rate of about 40% of their season tickets for this coming season. Primarily that's COVID related, but we like to be in the 70 to 80% of renewals. So we've got a lot of challenges, but the point I'm saying is that your Des Moines Symphony asks the hard questions. We have a very aggressive and vibrant strategic plan. We're accountable to it. Every person has their little sandbox, and we have to be accountable to the board. All of our staff does, as I do. We're going to hit this goal, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We report once a year, and if something on that list is not done, we have to explain why. We have a very aggressive staff, professional staff that understands what our purposes are. I am surrounded by people that just make me look good, and I'm privileged about that. But more than anything, we all have one heartbeat, which is giving this community the very best musical performances that we can. And that, there's no difference in my mind from playing Beethoven on a Saturday night and playing Whitney Houston on an outdoor concert at Waterworks Park. These are things that we are very proud of, and by the way, it's something that primarily is specifically American, that Americans pride themselves on the variety and the many kinds of music, many kinds of concerts that we can produce. And that to me is something that's very exciting in our country. Thank you very much. I continue to see a lot of familiar faces. I really appreciate everything that you've done. Speaking at this club just brings back a lot of memories, because I remember the old Fort Des Moines, speaking there when I first came. Bob Burnett introduced me, the past CEO of the Meredith Corporation. So thank you very much for everything. I hope to see you at a concert tonight. We're playing with Bernadette Peters, the great Bernadette Peters. How about that? 2 weeks from this weekend, we're playing a concert that features the world preeminent guitarist, Sharon Isbin. She's a fantastic guitarist and been a friend of mine for years. So she'll be here playing some Brubeck jazz and then a more traditional piece. We're also doing Daphnis and Chloe on that program of Ravel, and the Gershwin American Opera. So that's a program, by the way, that was sponsored by the estate of Harriet Macomber, who left us a major gift, the largest major gift in the history of the symphony. And so each year in perpetuity, we're going to be able to do a program where I can hire 7 percussionists and 14 wind players and spend all this money that they have to count. They get nervous when I start playing, but then when I raise the money, see, now let me spend it how I think Des Moines will harvest. Finally, I want to say one thing about the Symphony Academy. We're one of 5 schools, 5 orchestras in the country that has a school associated to us. Pre-COVID, we had 600 families at the corner of 10th and Locust, the Masonic Temple building. That's our school, and that was formed for 3 reasons. The first reason was that it was the right thing to do, because teaching in the Des Moines schools, teachers would retire and they weren't being replaced, so we had to add some enhancement to kids that wanted music. 2, we wanted to be certain that people understood when I go to a businessman, businesswoman, and talk about the symphony. If I talk about Beethoven, sometimes some of your eyes glaze over. So I talk about children and music, and then it gets your attention. So this is part of a fundraising tool for us. And then finally, connecting all those families to the Civic Center. So there was a big audience development part of that, which is very exciting for us. So one of 5 orchestras in the country. There's over 1,500 orchestras in the country, and we're one of 5 that has this fantastic school, and I'm very, very proud of that. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything.
I was at your concert on Sunday night, and I just want to say how nice it was. It was just fantastic. When you talk about the experience, I will echo that feeling that every time I've gone to a Des Moines Symphony concert, you do walk away with a special feeling. So I think there is something very unique to that. I'm also intrigued with how you have been able to bring up the quality of your symphony to the present day, and the fact you got the variety program. Could you speak on that just a little bit more, how you raise the whole quality element?
Well,
Because I remember what it was like in the 1980s, and it was nothing like what it is today.
yeah, I'm not sure I can articulate it briefly, but what I can say is that the first step had little to do with talent. It had a lot to do with attitude, preparation. And the only way that was going to start was with me. And for any of you that know me, you know that I still study 4 hours a day. I'm still looking at new music. I'm still researching new music. I'm going places to hear other concerts, learn from other people. It's just in my DNA. The orchestra, they catch on to that. They know they're going to get a first-class experience and a knowledgeable experience with me. I'm never going to ask them to do anything that I don't think they're capable of doing. And the easy way is that conductors stay in a community 5 years and then go on, because if they make 20 people mad a year, after 3 or 4 years, the whole orchestra's mad. So I try to keep people, it's not that they're not going to hear things that they're not going to like, but I try to keep people positive, I try to keep them encouraged, energize them. Seeing an old guy on the podium with a lot of energy, just that much is good for some of these young people to see. So I'm very, very motivated about the music and very concerned about the performances that we give here are the very best we can. And I think I have a lot of like-minded people surrounding me that support that. But thank you for your comments. Yes, sir.
I'd like to compliment you on your programming. And I think you've already alluded to it, but we all have our favorites, the war horses, but you keep coming up with this new music that at least I've never heard before. And I do find it very fascinating and energizing. And I'll make one other comment, try to keep it positive. One of my pet peeves is artists that milk an audience, and the Des Moines Symphony does not do that. And I, for one, appreciate that very much.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you about artists that you've seen in build an audience. I have a story about that, but I can't tell it in public.
Do you think you can merge country with classic?
question.
I love all music, and that's the hardest. That's the hardest thing to do. You know, when we do Whitney, or we do Adele, or we do Frank, or we do Ella, we have to find just the right artist that can sell that. They don't have to sound like that, but they have to have the same sort of appeal and personality. You're selling a brand. And when you say country, I would think that doing an evening of country music with somebody that sounds like Waylon Jennings would be a difficult sell. However, there was a documentary on one of the cable channels that I saw with Jessie Mueller, who's a Broadway star, and she and Megan Hilty, also a Broadway star, portrayed two country artists, and that was fantastic. And I put out an email to Jessie, who's a friend of mine, and said, I want to know a little bit more about the background, the arrangements, and so on. And we're working on that right now. So that's something. That's the kind of attraction that I'm hoping to find out more. But country music is terrific. I mean, you just have to find the right venue, the right artists, and whatnot. But are you a country music fan?
Yes, and a lot of classical music as
Yeah.
well, and jazz, for sure.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Matt, the Queen just died.
Queen Elizabeth just died.
Oh,
Just-
no.
That's what my phone was.
Oh, no. Queen Elizabeth just died, if you hadn't heard that. So that's big news. Well, I wanted to pivot to a couple of things. First, we need to say thank you. Thank you to you, Maestro Joe. My goodness, great comments, and your years of service to the city of Des Moines are so appreciated, and all of us here are so grateful for you and the organization that all of you are running very well. Thank you for being our guest today, and Dr. Doug, thank you for your leadership there. In recognition of the precious time you donated to us today, we're going to give a book in your honor to the Des Moines Public Library. This book becomes part of the collection that is the Rotary Rosie Reader Van, a van that was made possible through a donation by our community grants program in 2020. So that van services a lot of kids and others who can't make it to the central locations. Okay, so pivoting, one other thing. We have Northwestern in our roots, I'm happy to hear that. But there is a big football game coming up this weekend that I couldn't help note. So I wonder if there's anybody in the audience brave enough to sing the Iowa fight song or the Iowa State fight song. Seeing none, good luck to all of you and your teams. Last but not least, we need to talk about what's coming up next. Please consider sharing what we all agree is one of the most valuable attributes of our club, this podium, and its high quality speakers. Think about who you know who would be an outstanding addition to our club and invite them to attend one of our upcoming programs. Next week is an interesting week. We're not at the Embassy Club, so please make sure that you remember that. And please, if possible, RSVP for one of three, what will be, I believe will be excellent options. Mark Snell, Susan Judkins-Jostin, and Brian Blankenberg are all hosting us at their places of business. You need to sign up online, or I guess you could contact Kitty directly, either by email or phone. That will work too. But so far, we are a little late on RSVPs, so I'd really like you to spend some time thinking about whether that would be good. We have heard over and over again that fellowship outside of Thursdays is something that people are clamoring for. This is a great opportunity to meet more of your Rotary friends in a smaller environment, so please take advantage of that. And if you're a leader, either on the board or in one of our committees, remember that you need to RSVP to our offsite, which is taking place at St. John's downtown next week. After that, we'll have one of our governor candidates for governor, Deidre DeGier, and then on the 29th will be Melissa Bine from the Beacon. So again, please think about who you might want to invite. So again, thank you for your time today. We are adjourning on time.